The massive chamber on Centauri Prime buzzed with angry voices from dozens of alien species. Jake Morrison sat in the human section, watching the chaos unfold around him. He had been Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council for 8 years, and he had never seen them this worked up before. Speaker Vexthara rose from her crystal throne at the center of the chamber. Her body gleamed like a living diamond, casting rainbow patterns across the walls as she moved. The noise died down as all eyes turned toward her. Jake knew what was coming. The humans were in trouble again. We gather today to address the continued violations of galactic law by the human species, Vexthara announced. Her voice rang out clear and cold. The evidence before us is overwhelming. Jake felt his jaw tighten. Here we go again, he thought. Every few months it was the same thing. Humans were too fast, too creative, too dangerous. They broke rules that other species had followed for thousands of years. Counselor Zephyrin of the hegemony stood up next. His gray skin looked even paler than usual, and his forearms waved dramatically as he spoke. The humans have established 17 new trade routes without council approval. They bypass our ancient commerce guilds and destroy the balance we have maintained for centuries. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Jake wanted to stand up and shout that those trade routes cut travel time in half and made goods cheaper for everyone. But he had learned to stay quiet during these sessions. Nothing he said would change their minds. The accusations kept coming. Ambassador Krell from the Vorthan Empire complained about human terraforming projects. They change entire worlds in decades instead of the proper millennium-long process. They show no respect for natural order. Jake bit his tongue. The Vorthan process was so slow that most species died out before seeing results. Human terraforming actually worked and gave people places to live. But pointing that out would only make things worse. Dr. Yextal from the Science Collective was next. Her tentacles writhed with anger as she spoke. Worst of all, the humans have developed faster-than-light communication without council oversight. This technology could disrupt the fabric of space itself. That one really bothered Jake. Human scientists had worked for 50 years to create instant communication across the galaxy. It was their greatest achievement, and now the aliens wanted to take it away. The human species refuses to submit to genetic compatibility testing, added Counselor Murdoch. How can we trust beings who will not prove their biological safety to other species? Jake almost laughed at that one. Humans had been living alongside dozens of alien species for 2 centuries without any problems. The testing was just another way to control them. Speaker Vexthara raised one crystalline hand for silence. The Council has reached a decision. Humanity must submit all colonies to protective oversight. All faster-than-light communication networks must be surrendered to Council control. Genetic testing will be mandatory for all humans in galactic space. The chamber erupted in cheers and applause. Jake felt something snap inside him. He had spent 8 years trying to make peace with these people. He had swallowed his pride, made compromises, and watched humanity get pushed around by species that feared human progress. Jake stood up slowly. The chamber gradually fell silent as delegates noticed the human ambassador rising from his seat. His footsteps echoed in the sudden quiet as he walked to the center of the floor. Speaker Vexthara, honored delegates, Jake began, his voice calm and steady. I have listened to your concerns about humanity for 8 years. I have tried to find common ground and build understanding between our species and yours. He paused and looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of aliens who had called humans dangerous and reckless. Today I realize that our differences cannot be resolved through discussion or compromise. You fear what humans represent. You fear change, progress, and the freedom to choose our own path. Vexthara leaned forward on her throne. Ambassador Morrison, you will submit to the Council's decision or face the consequences. Jake smiled for the first time in months. No, Speaker Vexthara, we will not. As of this moment, humanity formally withdraws from all galactic treaties. Earth and all human colonies will no longer participate in the Galactic Council, the Trade Consortium, or the Defense Pact. The chamber exploded in chaos. Aliens jumped to their feet, shouting and waving appendages in outrage. Some demanded military action, others called for immediate sanctions. Jake ignored them all. Humanity will handle its own affairs from now on, he continued over the noise. We thank you for teaching us that we do not belong in your version of galactic civilization. Jake turned and walked toward the exit. Behind him, the aliens continued shouting threats and demands. He did not look back. As the chamber doors closed behind him, Jake felt lighter than he had in years. Outside the chamber, his aide Peter Lewis was waiting with a worried expression. Sir, what happens now? Jake straightened his jacket and headed toward their ship. Now we go home, Peter. We tell Earth that it's time to leave. 3 months had passed since Jake Morrison walked out of the Galactic Council chambers. Captain Lisa Warren stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching the final preparations for departure. Her ship was one of the largest vessels ever built by humans, designed to carry 50,000 colonists to a new home among the stars. Through the massive viewports, Lisa could see hundreds of other ships preparing for the same journey. Colony transports, cargo vessels, research ships, and military escorts all waited in formation around Earth. The sight took her breath away. In her 20-year career in the Space Force, she had never imagined seeing so many human ships in one place. Captain, we're receiving the final departure clearance from Earth Control, reported her communications officer, Lieutenant Danny Chun. Lisa nodded. Acknowledged. Begin final systems check. Down on Earth, President Charles Hayes stood before cameras in the Oval Office, preparing to address not just his planet but every human settlement across the galaxy. His speech would be transmitted instantly using the faster-than-light communication network that had caused so much trouble with the Council. My fellow humans, the President began, today we begin the greatest journey in our species' history. For 200 years we have tried to find our place in galactic society. We have bent our nature, suppressed our instincts, and allowed others to dictate how we should live and grow. In her laboratory on Europa Station, Dr. Amanda Foster finished packing the last of her research materials. She had been the head of xenobiology at the Galactic Science Institute for 15 years, working alongside alien scientists from across the galaxy. Yesterday, she had submitted her resignation along with every other human in the organization. Her Altarian colleague, Dr. Vexamur, had begged her to stay. Your research into cellular regeneration could revolutionize medicine for dozens of species, he had pleaded. But Amanda's mind was made up. If the galaxy did not want humans as partners, they would not have humans as servants either. The human spirit requires freedom, President Hayes continued in his address. We need the liberty to explore, to create, to make mistakes and learn from them. We need the right to push boundaries and discover what lies beyond the next star. Since the galaxy cannot accept this fundamental part of who we are, we will find our own path. Commander Rick Stone oversaw the evacuation of the human colony on Kepler 442b. The settlement had been humanity's proudest achievement in the Outer Rim, a thriving community of 2 million people who had turned a barren world into a garden. Now, transport ships landed every hour to take them away. The other species in the Kepler system watched in stunned silence as humans methodically dismantled everything they had built. Factories, schools, hospitals, research centers, all abandoned, or destroyed so they could not be misused by others. Rick felt a pang of sadness watching decades of work being erased, but he understood the necessity. His second-in-command, Major Katie Brooks, approached with a tablet full of reports. Sir, the Zilonian delegation is requesting a meeting. They want to negotiate for humans to stay and maintain the agricultural systems? Rick shook his head. Tell them we've left full technical specifications for everything we built. If they can't figure it out from there, that's their problem. Back on Earth, the Exodus was creating shockwaves throughout galactic society. Human employees resigned from corporations, universities, and government agencies across thousands of worlds. Within weeks, entire economic sectors began showing signs of straying. Captain Warren received a transmission from her sister ship, the UES New Horizon. Lisa, you need to see the cargo manifests from the industrial worlds, said Captain Frank Miller. The aliens have no idea how much stuff we built and maintained for them. Lisa pulled up the data on her screen and whistled softly. Human engineers had designed or improved the infrastructure on nearly every major world in Council space. Jump gates, power plants, communication networks, transportation systems, humans had been involved in building or upgrading all of it. They really didn't pay attention to what we were doing, did they? Lisa muttered. President Hayes was wrapping up his address. To our alien neighbors who may be listening, we hold no ill will toward you. Our differences are philosophical, not personal. We leave behind everything we built as a gift. Use it wisely and prosper. The president paused, looking directly into the camera. To my fellow humans, do not mourn what we leave behind. We go forward to something better, something truly our own. The universe is vast and full of wonders waiting to be discovered. Today we become explorers again. Dr. Foster sealed the last shipping container of her equipment and headed for the transport pad. Around her, Europa Station hummed with activity as thousands of humans prepared to leave. The alien scientists who remained watched with growing concern as their human colleagues disappeared one by one. Amanda, please reconsider, Dr. Vexmer called out as she passed his laboratory. The Institute will collapse without human innovation. Amanda stopped and turned back to her old friend. Then maybe it deserves to collapse, Vex. You had 2 centuries to treat us as equals. Instead, you treated us like dangerous children who needed constant supervision. Commander Stone watched the last transport lift off from Kepler 442b, carrying the final group of human colonists to safety. The planet's 3 moons hung in the purple sky like ancient guardians. Witnessing the end of human presence in the system, he activated his communicator and sent a final message to the remaining species in the system. To our former neighbors. The infrastructure and facilities we built here are yours now. The technical manuals are in the central database. May you find more success with them than we found with you. Captain Warren felt her ship shudder slightly as the massive engines came online. Around her, hundreds of other vessels were doing the same. The largest coordinated departure in galactic history was about to begin. All ships report ready for departure, Lieutenant Chun announced. Lisa took one last look at Earth through the viewport. The blue and white marble had been humanity's home for millions of years. Now it would be just a memory. Signal the fleet, she ordered. Execute jump sequence in 3, 2, 1. Space twisted around them as hundreds of human ships vanished into hyperspace, carrying 12 billion people toward an uncertain but promising future among the stars. 6 months had passed since the last human ship disappeared into the void beyond known space. Station Master Krelvac stared at the warning lights flashing across his control board, each one representing another system failure on Zarian Station. The massive space station had housed 50,000 beings for 30 years, but now it was slowly dying. Sir, the atmospheric processors are failing again, reported his assistant, a nervous potassoid named Yilmar. The human-designed upgrades are shutting down one by one. Krelvac's 4 arms moved frantically across the control panels, trying to reroute power and keep the life support systems running. 5 years ago, human engineers had upgraded Zarian Station's ancient systems, turning it from a barely functional outpost into a thriving hub of commerce. Now, without human maintenance, those same upgrades were becoming death traps. Contact the Mordic Engineering Guild, Krelvac ordered. They built the original station. Maybe they can help. The response came back within an hour, and it was not good news. The human modifications are too advanced for our understanding, the Mortuk chief engineer reported. We can maintain the basic life support, but the enhanced systems are beyond our capabilities. You'll need to evacuate half the station within a month. Krelvac felt his heart sink. Zarian Station was home to refugees from 12 different species. Where would they go? And how could he explain that the humans they had driven away were the only ones who could save them? The same crisis was playing out across the galaxy. On Altair 7, the planetary government faced the collapse of their food distribution network. Human logistics experts had designed a system that could feed 2 billion people efficiently. Without them, Supply chains were breaking down and famines were beginning in the outer provinces. Governor Feldara of Altair VII had been one of the loudest voices, calling for human restrictions in the Galactic Council. Now she sat in emergency sessions with her advisors, trying to figure out how to feed her people. The human-designed agricultural systems are producing record crops, reported her food minister, but we can't get the harvest to the cities. The distribution algorithms are too complex for our computers to handle. What about the backup systems? Feldara asked desperately. There are no backup systems, Governor. The humans built everything to be efficient, not redundant. They never expected to leave. Similar conversations were happening on hundreds of worlds. The Galactic Trade Network, which had operated smoothly for decades, was now experiencing delays and bottlenecks that grew worse each day. Human traders had not just carried cargo from place to place. They had optimized routes, negotiated deals, and solved problems that other species had not even noticed. Admiral Betty Clark commanded the last official human presence in Council space, a small defense fleet that had been protecting human interests during the evacuation. Her ships were scheduled to make the final jump to unknown space within the week, but the messages from alien governments kept pouring in. Admiral, we have 17 urgent requests for assistance, her communications officer reported. The Centaurians are begging us to stay and maintain their jump gate network. The Volans are offering triple pay for our engineers. The Batazgomers Guild wants to negotiate exclusive contracts for human logistics support. Betty looked at the messages with a mixture of sadness and anger. For months, these same governments had supported the Council's decision to restrict human activities. They had voted to force humans to submit to genetic testing and surrender their faster-than-light communication network. Now that humans were leaving, suddenly they realized what they were losing. Send the same response to all of them, Betty ordered. Thank them for their offers, but inform them that humanity's decision is final. The most critical failure was happening at the very heart of galactic civilization. On Centauri Prime, the Galactic Council's headquarters was experiencing cascading system failures that threatened to shut down interstellar communication across half the galaxy. Technician Morquet worked frantically in the Quantum Processing Center, trying to understand the human-built communication systems that were slowly dying. The crystalline processors that enabled faster-than-light communication were beyond anything his species had ever created. How did they make these work? He muttered to his assistant. The quantum entanglement patterns are stable across distances that should be impossible. The human documentation is incomplete, his assistant replied. They left technical manuals, but they assume knowledge that we don't have. Speaker Vexthora herself came down to the processing center, her crystalline body reflecting the emergency. Lighting, how long until complete failure? She asked. Morquet hesitated before answering. 6 months, maybe less. Without human maintenance, the entire faster-than-light communication network will collapse. The speaker's inner light dimmed visibly. Without instant communication, the Galactic Council would become just another local government. They would have no way to coordinate with distant worlds or maintain their authority over the galaxy. Admiral Clark received one final transmission before her fleet's departure. It came directly from Speaker Vexthara herself, transmitted on emergency channels to reach the human ships. Admiral Clark, I speak for the Galactic Council in making this urgent. Plea? The message began. We now understand that humanity's role in our civilization was far greater than we realized. We are prepared to offer full council membership with unprecedented privileges. Humans would have voting rights equal to the founding species, full autonomy over your territories, and guaranteed protection for your technological developments. Betty listened to the entire message before responding. She thought about Jake Morrison, who had spent 8 years trying to find compromise with these people. She thought about the human scientists, engineers, and traders who had been forced to abandon their life's work. She thought about the colonies that had been torn apart because aliens feared human progress. Speaker Vexthara, this is Admiral Clark, she began her reply. Your message has been received and understood. On behalf of humanity, I thank you for your generous offer. Betty paused, choosing her words carefully. However, humanity's decision stands. We have chosen our path, and it does not include the Galactic Council or known space. You want it to be free of humanity's dangerous influence. Congratulations. You have achieved your goal. The Admiral looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. Young men and women who had devoted their lives to protecting human interests in a galaxy that had never truly accepted them. Now they were going home to a future built entirely by human hands. Prepare for final jump, Betty ordered. Set course? For the rendezvous coordinates. It's time to see what our people have built in the darkness between the stars. The jump drives engaged with a familiar whine, and the last organized human presence vanished from known space. Behind them, they left. A galaxy suddenly aware of the vast silence where humanity used to be. 2 years had passed since Admiral Clark's fleet disappeared beyond the galactic rim. The Galactic Council chambers on Centauri Prime buzzed with angry voices, but this time the anger was directed inward. Speaker Vexthara watched helplessly, as her authority crumbled along with galactic civilization itself. The economic reports are catastrophic, announced Finance Minister Kelter, his tentacles trembling as he read from his datapad. Galactic trade has dropped 40%. 17 sectors have declared bankruptcy. The unemployment rate among spacefaring species has reached levels not seen in 2,000 years. Councillor Zephyrin, who had led the campaign against humanity, found himself the target of furious delegates from across the galaxy. The Altarian Republic's ambassador stood up and pointed directly at him with all 6 of her arms. You promised us that removing human influence would bring stability, Ambassador Yelsina shouted. Instead, you have destroyed our entire way of life. The Altarian Republic demands immediate action to restore human technology, or we withdraw. From this council, similar threats came from dozens of other species. The Vegan Trade Union wanted compensation for their collapsed shipping networks. The Centaurian Federation was threatening to seize council assets to pay for their failing infrastructure. Even the normally peaceful Betazoids were talking about military action. Order! Order! Speaker Vexthara called out, her crystalline voice echoing through the chamber. We will find solutions to these problems without humanity. We survived for millions of years before they joined us. But we never lived with their technology before abandoning it, countered the delegate from Zarian Station. Half of our infrastructure depends on human innovations. We cannot simply go back to the old ways. The speaker knew he was right. The galaxy had become dependent on human efficiency, human innovation, human problem-solving abilities. Without them, ancient systems that had worked for millennia were proving inadequate for modern galactic society. In desperation, the Council authorized Project Reconnection, a massive effort to locate humanity's new territory and negotiate their return. They gathered the best scouts from 30 different species and equipped them with the fastest ships available. The mission would be led by Captain Nina Bell, an Altarian explorer with experience in uncharted space. Captain Bell stood in the briefing room aboard her flagship, studying star charts with her diverse crew. We have trace signatures of human. Faster-than-light drives leading toward the galactic rim, she explained to her officers. Our mission is to follow those signatures, locate human settlements, and begin diplomatic contact. What if they refuse to meet with us? Asked her first officer, a Betazoid named Morval. Then we keep trying, Bell replied. The Council has given us unlimited resources and authority to negotiate, whatever it takes to bring them back. The fleet of 20 ships jumped toward unknown space, following faint energy traces that were already 2 years old. What they found, after weeks of searching, defied all their expectations. The first sign was a massive orbital platform that appeared on their sensors as they entered an unexplored system. The structure was clearly human in design, but far more advanced than anything they remembered. It stretched for hundreds of kilometers, bristling with technologies that their scanners could not identify. Captain, we're being scanned, reported the sensor officer. The energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases. Attempt to establish communication, Bell ordered. Use standard diplomatic frequencies. The response came immediately, but not from the platform. 3 sleek ships appeared out of nowhere, moving with impossible speed and grace. The designs were unmistakably human, but these vessels made the old Earth fleet look primitive by comparison. Unknown vessels, you have entered human space without authorization, came a calm voice over the communication channel. State your purpose and prepare to be escorted to the diplomatic station. Captain Bell felt her hearts racing. They had found humanity, but humanity had clearly found something else as well. The beings who had left Council space as refugees now commanded technology that surpassed anything the galaxy had ever seen. The human escort ships led them to a diplomatic station that took Bell's breath away. The structure was a work of art, as much as engineering, with flowing lines and organic curves that seemed to grow rather than be built. Inside, the artificial gravity felt completely natural, without the subtle distortions that plagued even the most advanced. Council Technology. Ambassador Jake Morrison met them in a reception hall that could have housed the entire Galactic Council chamber. He looked older but healthier than Bell remembered from the archives. His uniform bore the insignia of humanity's new government, an organization the Council had never heard of. Captain Bell, welcome to New Geneva Station, Jake said with polite courtesy. I must admit, we did not expect visitors from Council space so soon. Bell and her diplomatic team presented their credentials and began their prepared speeches about the galaxy's desperate situation. They offered everything they could think of: full Council membership with voting rights, guaranteed autonomy for human territories, exclusive trade agreements, even representation in the Council's highest leadership positions. Jake listened patiently to their entire presentation before responding. When he spoke, his voice held no anger or bitterness, just a polite indifference that somehow felt worse than hostility. Captain Bell, I appreciate your government's offers, Jake said. However, humanity must respectfully decline. The Altarian captain felt her world shift. Ambassador, surely you understand the crisis facing the galaxy. Billions of beings are suffering because of the infrastructure failures. Only human technology can save them. That is not our problem, Jake replied calmly. The Council made its position clear 2 years ago. You wanted to be free of human influence, and we have granted that wish. Bell tried a different approach. What about moral responsibility? Surely humanity has an obligation to help suffering people, regardless of politics. Jake's expression grew slightly colder. Captain, you are assuming that humanity still feels bound by the moral framework of Council civilization. We do not. We have moved beyond the limitations of your society. Director Kevin Moore joined them for a tour of the station's public areas. What the alien delegates saw left them stunned. The technology on display was centuries ahead of anything in Council space. Energy systems that seemed to violate known physics. Artificial gravity generators no larger than briefcases. Most shocking of all, they encountered humans who appeared to be over 200 years old but looked barely middle-aged. How is this possible? Whispered Bell's medical officer. Human science has advanced considerably since our departure, Director Moore explained casually. Free from Council restrictions on genetic research and artificial intelligence, we have solved problems that your civilization considers impossible. The aliens realized they were no longer dealing with the junior species they had dismissed from the Council. Humanity had become something greater during their exile, and they clearly had no need for the galaxy that had rejected them. Captain Bell made one final appeal. Ambassador Morrison, our intelligence reports indicate that several Council species are preparing for war. The old order is collapsing. Surely humanity has some interest in preventing galactic chaos. General Patricia Webb joined the meeting at that point. Her presence seemed to change the temperature in the room. Captain Bell, we are well aware of the situation in Council space. We have been monitoring your conflicts, your economic collapse, and the social unrest spreading across your territories. The General activated a holographic display that showed detailed intelligence on dozens of Council worlds. The information was more complete and current than what most Council governments had about their own territories. We know about the brewing Wars, the failed diplomacy, and the desperation that brought you here, General Webb continued. What you need to understand is that we are not coming back to clean up your mess. You made your choice, and now you must live with the consequences. Captain, Belle felt her last hopes crashing down. But surely you cannot just abandon billions of innocent people. We are not abandoning anyone, Jake Morrison said firmly. We are simply refusing to rescue people who chose to reject us. There is a difference. The diplomatic mission returned to Council space with news that shattered what remained of Galactic confidence. Humanity was not only surviving in exile, they were thriving beyond anything the Council had thought possible. And they had no intention of returning to save the civilization that had cast them out. The alien diplomatic team sat in stunned silence as Jake Morrison continued his explanation of humanity's transformation. Captain Bell could barely comprehend what she was hearing. The species that had left Council space as outcasts had become something beyond anything the galaxy had imagined. You have to understand, Captain Bell, that our exile was the greatest gift you could have given us, Jake said, walking to a massive viewport that showed the bustling activity around New Geneva Station. For 2 centuries, we tried to fit into your version of galactic civilization. We suppressed our instincts, followed your rules, and allowed our growth to be limited by your fears. Through the viewport, Bell could see ships moving with impossible grace between orbital structures that defied conventional physics. The technology on display made her own advanced vessel look like a primitive toy. When you forced us to leave, you freed us to become what we were always meant to be, Jake continued. Within months of our departure, human innovation exploded, beyond anything we had achieved while under Council restrictions. Director Kevin Moore gestured for the delegation to follow him deeper into the station. What they saw on their tour challenged everything they thought they knew about the limits of science and engineering. This gravitational control system weighs 12 kilograms and can generate Earth-normal gravity for an entire city, Moore explained casually, pointing to a device no larger than a briefcase. Under Council oversight, human scientists were forbidden from experimenting with space-time manipulation. They called it too dangerous. Bell's science officer, Dr. Vexcall, examined the device with wide eyes. The energy requirements alone should be impossible. How do you power such a system? Moore smiled. We discovered that Council physics was limited by Council imagination. Once we were free to think beyond those constraints, new possibilities opened up everywhere. They passed through a medical bay where Bell saw something that made her question everything she knew about biology. Humans who looked to be in their 30s were discussing research projects they had been working on for over a century. Dr. Sarah Flynn here is actually 147 years old, Moore mentioned casually. She was part of the original Exodus but chose to extend her life using our new techniques. Dr. Flynn looked up from her work with the face of someone barely past their prime. Director Moore, please don't make me sound ancient. I still have at least another 300 years of research planned. Bell felt dizzy. Immortality? You've solved biological death? Not immortality, Dr. Flynn corrected. Extended life with the option to transfer consciousness to new bodies when necessary. We've also eliminated most diseases, reversed aging, and enhanced human physical and mental capabilities far beyond natural limits. The tour continued through laboratories where human scientists worked alongside beings that Bell did not recognize. These aliens were clearly not from Council space, and their technology appeared to be on par with the new human innovations. Who are they? Bell asked, pointing to a group of energy beings who seemed to exist as pure light. The ethereals, Jake explained. We encountered them 6 months after leaving your space. They had been hiding from galactic civilization for millennia, afraid that more primitive species would try to exploit their technology. One of the ethereals approached them, its voice resonating directly in their minds. We had observed Council species for thousands of years, it communicated. Most showed only aggression and fear when faced with superior capabilities. Humans were the first to offer genuine partnership and mutual respect. Bell realized that humanity had not just survived their exile. They had found allies far more advanced than anything in council space. How many species have you encountered? 3 major civilizations so far, Jake replied. The ethereals, who exist as energy beings. The architects, who can manipulate matter at the molecular level. And the navigators, who have mastered travel between galaxies. All of them value the same things we do: freedom, innovation, and the right to grow without artificial limitations. The implications hit Bell like a physical blow. While council space struggled with collapsing infrastructure, humanity had formed alliances with species that made council technology look like stone tools. They entered a vast chamber where General Patricia Webb was reviewing tactical displays with human military officers. The holographic map showed not just local space, but entire galactic regions that council surveys had never reached. General Webb, our guests are curious about humanity's defensive capabilities, Jake said. The general looked up from her displays, sizing up the alien delegation with experienced eyes. I suppose there's no harm in showing them the basics, she said. Computer, display fleet status report Alpha. The hologram changed to show a 3-dimensional map of human space. Thousands of icons appeared, representing ships, stations, and installations scattered across dozens of star systems. The scale was breathtaking. Our current defensive fleet consists of 1,200 capital ships, 8,000 escort vessels, and approximately 2 million automated defense platforms, Webb explained matter-of-factly. Each capital ship is equipped with technology that your council would classify as impossible. Bell's tactical officer made rapid calculations on his portable computer, then looked up with an expression of pure shock. General, a single one of your defensive fleets could defeat the combined military forces of the entire Galactic Council. That estimate is probably conservative, Webb replied. Our ships are designed by species with millions of years of advancement beyond Council technology. We also have defensive systems that exist in dimensions your scientists have never detected. Captain Bell felt the last of her hopes dying. She had come here expecting to find human refugees grateful for any chance to return home. Instead, she had found a civilization that had surpassed everything the galaxy had ever achieved. Ambassador Morrison, surely there must be something we can offer, Bell pleaded. Some way to restore relations between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. Jake looked at her with something that might have been sympathy. Captain, you're still thinking in terms of the old relationship. You imagine that we want something from council space, that we miss what we left behind. He gestured toward the viewport where massive construction projects stretched to the horizon. Look around you. We have everything we need and more. We have allies who respect us as equals. We have unlimited freedom to grow and explore. We have solved problems that council science said were impossible. What about Earth? Bell asked desperately. Don't you miss your homeworld? Earth is wherever humans choose to make it, Jake replied. We have terraformed 17 worlds in the past 2 years, each one more beautiful than the one we left. Some of them have ecosystems that surpass anything nature alone could create. Director Moore activated another display showing images of these new worlds. Forests with trees that grew in perfect spirals reaching toward alien suns. Oceans filled with bioluminescent creatures that painted the water with living light. Cities that seemed to grow like living things, adapting to their environment. These worlds were designed by the architects using human creativity and ethereal energy manipulation, Moore explained. They are truly ours in a way that Earth never could be under council oversight. Captain Bell made one final attempt. What about the innocent people suffering in council space? Children who have never done anything to harm humanity. General, Webb answered that question with cold precision. Captain, are you suggesting that we should sacrifice human lives to save people who belong to governments that rejected us? Should we risk our new allies and our future for the sake of those who called us dangerous and forced us to leave? Every species makes choices, Jake added. The Council chose to fear human progress rather than embrace it. Individual citizens chose to support governments that restricted human rights. Now they must live with the consequences of those choices. Belle realized that she was not just facing a more advanced humanity. She was facing a fundamentally different humanity. These people had been shaped by their exile into something harder, more focused, and completely independent of galactic civilization. "There is nothing we can say or offer that would change your minds?" she asked. Jake shook his head slowly. "Captain Belle, we appreciate that you made this long journey to find us. But humanity has moved beyond the need for council approval or council society. We suggest you return home and encourage your governments to solve their own problems instead of looking for others to rescue them." As the alien delegation prepared to leave New Geneva Station, they carried with them the knowledge that would transform galactic politics forever. Humanity was not only surviving without the council, they were thriving in ways that made council civilization look primitive and backwards. And they had no intention of ever coming back. 5 years had passed since Captain Bell's diplomatic mission returned empty-handed from human space. The galaxy that had once prided itself on order and stability now resembled a shattered mirror, with each fragment reflecting a different crisis. President Susan Davis stood before a gathering of human leaders on the anniversary of their exodus from council space. The ceremony took place on New Terra, humanity's first completely artificial world, created through a partnership with the architects. Every detail of the planet had been designed to support human life perfectly, from the length of its days to the composition of its atmosphere. 5 years ago, we left a galaxy that feared what we represented, President Davis began, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd and transmitted instantly to every human settlement. We desperately wanted to belong to something greater than ourselves, only to discover that true belonging required us to become less than we could be. In the audience, Jake Morrison listened with satisfaction. He had retired from active diplomacy to become a historian, documenting humanity's transformation from galactic outcast to independent civilization. The changes still amazed him sometimes. "Today, we celebrate not just our survival, but our evolution," the president continued. "Free from artificial constraints, humanity has achieved in 5 years what took us centuries under council oversight." The statistics were staggering. Human space now encompassed 47 star systems, with a total population approaching 20 billion. More importantly, these were not the struggling colonies of the council era, but thriving worlds with technology that seemed like magic compared to the old days. Meanwhile, on Centauri Prime, the remnants of the Galactic Council faced their own grim anniversary. Speaker Vexthara presided over emergency sessions as reports poured in from across their shrinking territory. "The Altarian Republic has formally withdrawn from the Council," announced the clerk, his voice hollow with exhaustion. "They cite our inability to provide basic infrastructure support as the reason for their decision. It was the 7th major withdrawal this year. The Betazoid Federation, the Vegan Trade Union, and the Centauran Alliance had all abandoned the Council when it became clear that galactic government could no longer function effectively." "What about military intervention?" suggested Councillor Zephyrin, though his voice lacked conviction. "Surely we cannot allow this fragmentation to continue." General Mortek, the Council's military advisor, shook his massive head. "Our intelligence reports indicate that human defensive capabilities now exceed anything we could field by several orders of magnitude. More troubling, they appear to be sharing advanced weaponry with their new allies." The intelligence was correct. In human space, joint military exercises between humans, ethereals, architects, and navigators demonstrated coordination that would have been impossible between council species. The different civilizations had learned to work together as equals, rather than constantly competing for dominance. Dr. Amanda Foster, now director of the Human Science Consortium, REVIE research reports that would have seemed like fantasy just years earlier. Human scientists working with architect matter manipulation specialists had created materials stronger than any known substance. Collaboration with the ethereals had led to energy sources that could power entire planets indefinitely. "The funny thing is," Amanda told her assistant during a break between meetings, We accomplished more real science in our first year of exile than in 2 centuries under Council oversight. Her assistant, Dr. Nancy Wright, nodded enthusiastically. No restrictions on genetic research, no prohibitions on artificial intelligence development, no committees demanding to approve every experiment. We finally got to see what human curiosity could achieve when left alone. On the frontier of human space, exploration ships push deeper into uncharted regions every day. Captain Danny Foster, leading a joint human navigator expedition, stood on the bridge of his vessel as they approached their latest discovery, an entire galaxy that showed no signs of any technological civilization. "Captain, long-range scans?" "Confirm it," his science officer reported. "We're looking at 200 billion stars with no detectable faster-than-light signatures. No artificial energy sources, no signs of spacefaring life." Danny felt the familiar excitement of true discovery. This was what humans had always been meant for, pushing into the unknown, finding new frontiers, expanding the boundaries of the possible. "Transmit our findings to Earth Command," he ordered. "Request permission to begin preliminary surveys of the outer star systems." The response came back within minutes through humanity's instantaneous communication network. Permission granted. Welcome to the future. Back in Council space, the consequences of rejecting humanity continued to multiply. Zarian Station had been evacuated after its life support systems finally failed beyond repair. Altair 7 was experiencing widespread famine as their food distribution networks collapsed completely. Dozens of other worlds faced similar crises. Some Council species attempted to recreate human innovations through reverse engineering, but they lacked the fundamental understanding that had made human technology work. The devices they built were pale imitations that failed after brief periods of operation. "It's not just the technology," explained Dr. Veltar, a Betazoid scientist who had worked with humans before their departure. "It's the entire approach to problem solving. Humans think differently than we do. They see possibilities where we see limitations." Speaker Vextara faced the reality that her civilization was dying slowly. The grand galactic society that had endured for thousands of years was fragmenting, because they had rejected the one species capable of holding it together. "Perhaps we should attempt one more diplomatic mission," she suggested during a private council session. "Offer them complete autonomy, representation in our highest leadership positions, anything they want." Councillor Murdoch, one of the few original members still remaining, shook his head sadly. "Vextara, they don't want anything from us anymore. Captain Bell's reports were clear. They have moved beyond us entirely." The truth was more devastating than most Council members could accept. Humanity had not just rejected Council civilization. They had replaced it with something better. Their alliance with advanced alien species had given them access to knowledge and capabilities that made Council technology look primitive. President Davis concluded her anniversary address with words that would have terrified the Council if they had heard them. "To our fellow humans scattered across the stars, remember that this is only the beginning. We have proven that human potential, unleashed from artificial constraints, knows no limits. The universe is vast beyond imagination, filled with wonders waiting to be discovered and civilizations waiting to be befriended. We go forward not as the junior partners we once were, but as equals among the greatest powers in creation." Jake Morrison watched the celebration from his home on New Terra, a world that had never known the touch of Council oversight. His grandchildren played in gardens where impossible flowers bloomed under an artificial sun that would burn for millions of years. The galaxy that had rejected humanity was still struggling with the same problems they had always faced: fear of change, resistance to innovation, inability to work together as equals. Meanwhile, humanity had solved those problems by finding new partners who shared their values. The exodus that was meant to punish humanity had instead freed them to become something magnificent. The galaxy had gotten exactly what it asked for: freedom from human influence. But freedom, as they were learning, came with a price they had never expected to pay. In the depths of space, human exploration vessels pushed toward distant galaxies. while their former home struggled with the consequences of its own choices. The species that had once desperately wanted to belong to galactic civilization had discovered something far better. They had learned to belong to themselves and to partners who valued them as equals. The final verdict was clear. Humanity had not just survived their rejection. They had used it as the foundation for greatness that the galaxy could never have imagined.